Good afternoon, folks. Hey, it's Shooter Scott Henderson, and we're going to go over swing trade notes today, folks. Of course, at the end of our presentation, please do review our disclosures. Well, let me jump right into this. I think we're going to get a continued breakdown. We need some kind of catalyst to keep us out of this. And when I'm looking, I'm doing my month-end kind of review, and there's a couple things that I'm noticing. We now have a clean, clear flight to safety. Now, I don't see panic yet. However, I think we could see it, and so that's where I'm positioning. So this week's going to be really simple, and I'm going to do this a little differently than I normally would do it. And I'm going to just jump right to the Nasdaq over via QQQ, and I've highlighted a number of levels here to the downside. And now we are already testing this 466 level. It's now about 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. That said, equities or futures should open shortly, and then we really see how red of a week we're going to start off with. That's sort of my thinking. So my primary focus this entire week is going to be the Nasdaq. Even though I have other names that are in front of us, I really don't want to take anything long. And at this point, I want to focus on where my risk reward is. And the biggest risk reward is just to play the weak sister overall. If we look at the Magnificent Seven, they're all extremely weak. And the only one that I might add to the downside is Google if we start getting extremely weak. Outside of that, I'm just going to focus on the Nasdaq. So any rip, I'm going to be continuing to add to my shorts, and I'm going to highlight deeper pushes to the downside. So I'm going to start taking a piece of my gains from right now. I have this week's Friday 475s. Obviously, we're walking into the week in the money. And, I'm going to roll down to some 450s and roll down to some 420s as well. I'm going to stagger them out about 3 weeks to 6 weeks is the timeline that I'm thinking. But really, this is where my entire focus is this week. Going to be a nice, simple week. So with that said, let me jump into really what happened this last week. We really held our own until Friday, and then we just had that flush. That had a lot to do with optics and how the weekly expirations collided. So, that's ultimately where we saw that complete stall in the indices. Now, SPY was down close to 2% when I ran this, or worked it up about $11.42 shy. And it's really simple. Until 583 is reclaimed, it's sell any rip mode. Nasdaq pushed on that 468 at the close, down about 2.47%. And until we get back above that 480 range, 483 range, it's in a sell any rip mode as well. Now, Bitcoin is not as rough this week. However, it still looks to me like it's on the cliff. It does. We break below this 73.80, and that's my benchmark. We get below there, then if you're holding head. I'm not looking at it as a short trade because it's held up. It's held its own. It's done nothing wrong at 84K on a close this week. So there is, there's no FOMO, but there is relative strength there. Now I see TLT as being the canary in the coal mine here because it is screaming recession now. We're written in between the lines kind of thing. So as long as we stay above 82, it's whispering that something's going to break. So anytime it's counterintuitive to the Fed in how treasuries are reacting or yields are reacting, we should suspect that. Now, where there is some strength is gold and silver and commodities, DB, URA, and XLE. Now, I thought, it was one of my plans that I looked at going into this week, was I was looking at flipping off to commodities, and I was like, I'm looking at the numbers and I'm looking at the history and, ran all the data through Sentinel, and basically we didn't find the risk reward there to justify putting on that additional risk. We were better off sitting on the sidelines. So that did not get added to our book this week. And, the small caps, if we're going to bounce this week, the small caps will probably move the most. Historically, it's shown that small caps start moving once the dip buyers really come in. So we're going to find out how much this market is really controlled by the algos, I think Monday and Tuesday. Because if they're jumping on board trying to keep this market inflated, they're selling into the rip to take out retail. That's my take on that. Now, there was a little bit of insider activity that caught my Airbnb inside sellers. AVGO, Reddit, and Snowflake. What really catches my attention is that 48 million in Snowflake. And I keep thinking there is something we don't know about AI and shares like Snowflake or TD Ameritrade. Trade Desk, because your kernels don't just roll off a cliff like that. They're not a general, okay? They're not the Mag 7, but clearly there's secondary command in the U.S. stock market as far as companies. So why is so much getting hit? And I keep flipping back to the AI. I'm trying to understand right now, why are all these supply mechanisms for business, enterprise, etc., are floundering? And that $48 million is I'm reading really in between the lines there. That's a pretty decent chunk to exit on a stock that you are supporting and building. Something's going on there. They're hearing some kind of news that we're not hearing yet. So we want to keep our ear to the ground on that specific issue. How is AI affecting that? So now, as far as the government trades, Nvidia, Apple, and Google and Cat got all bought with lows. LMT is getting bought as well. Amazon is getting bought, but I think Amazon's going to dump much further, so I don't want to push that. And P&L, we had a decent number this week, and I was noticing I didn't have my HIMS loss on there because I got stopped at 50%. We'll go back and edit that and update it and put it on there. I don't know why I didn't catch it before, but we just noticed it now. Earnings this week, really, there's nothing. Restoration Hardware interests me a little bit, but not with the market conditions that we're in. I just don't think we're going to get that kind of pump to hold up with any type of trade for swinging for even 2 days or 3 days. That's my opinion. It's really an intraday play into this week, and that's my two. Now, there's a number of names that have my attention into earnings, and I highlighted them here and why I like them. However, again, my primary focus is going to be the Nasdaq and I've got this noise here because I really felt like I needed to put something else in the article for you guys, but my focus is going to be the Nasdaq. That's really nuts and bolts. I have no reason to look elsewhere as far as I'm concerned. One thing that I've learned in this market is know when to sit on the sideline and to stay the heck out of the way. Wait till you have your trigger to take your entry, and my trigger is a break below 466.92 on the opener next week. So that trigger gets hit, I'm adding to my short positions. I'm looking at building out 450 and 420 put. Well, that's what I have for this week, folks. Great trading. Until next time.